So, let me get out that.
And I'm sure Sue's on her way. She just doesn't stop at anything.
Is there a motion to go into non-public?
Motion to move to non-public?
And is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you.
Are we good to go?
Yeah, 4 is a quorum. Okay, so the reason cited for non-public is RSA 91A32C. Matters which, if discussed in public, would likely affect adversely the reputation of any person other than a board member. So I'm going to call the roll to go into non-public. Alexandria, Bridgewater, Bristol,
Yes.
Danbury, yes, Groton,
Yes.
Hebron, and New Hampton.
Yes.
Okay. Hebron will not be with us tonight. I am expecting the other two, so off we go. So the first item here is under approval or modification of agenda, and I have a suggestion for how to proceed, so there's some order, and to make sure that everybody has their questions answered, and their concerns addressed, so that we're ready for the November meeting. And my suggestion is that we just go around the table and each person ask any clarifying questions that they have about the budget, followed by any comments, followed by then Stacy's response to any of the comments that followed the clarification. So there'll be kind of 2 rounds. Questions first, get your answers, then any concerns. Does that sound okay? And then we can open discussion after.
So can I also add, so I also have 2 documents. One would be the tax cap calculation, which might actually be something you want to look at first, because that will
I'd rather
Probably.
not. I'd rather look at the items, but.
Okay, well, the reason I say that is because it is a pretty significant dollar amount. And so then what I also did was, I went through the budget and pulled out kind of the new items we put in there, significant increases, to try to come up with some recommendations for you. So I guess the only reason I say that is if we have to cut something, there's no sense in having a 45-minute discussion over that item if it's going to land itself in the cut pile at the end of the day. So, I don't know.
I was thinking that I would rather first have Stacy go over some of the highlights, some of the things that everybody's gonna ask us to kind of, kind of, I don't know if you had any kind of outline before we start, or?
Well, I kind of did that at the last meeting.
Yeah,
Yes.
I didn't have anything else.
Are there any revised kindergarten and visual numbers?
As is, as far as I know.
So what do you think? The rest of you?
We ask all the questions first, and then,
Well, just clarifying questions.
Suggested.
Just so that you know who's speaking for one thing. Everybody gets a turn. But, what do you think? 3 more of you over there.
I think we have to play it how it comes when we get there.
Do I need to vote to modify the agenda though?
Your suggestion, the way you want to defer to do it? I don't think we need to modify the agenda, that's just an approach on the agenda item.
Okay.
I think it's fine.
I understand what you're saying, Stacy, but I feel like you guys proposed a budget already, and so now I think you're proposing a modified budget, and we should have got the modified budget the last time.
Well, no, because my job is, I wanted to propose a budget that I thought was appropriate.
Okay,
I don't think the tax cap budget's appropriate,
okay.
but you have to get there.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm more than happy to answer any, like, and I can answer any questions you have.
I have a lot, but because I have a lot, and some might have the same, I'm gonna start at the end of the table and go around. So Jeff, do you have any questions?
Well, I think we ought to ask if there's any public comment before we start into the agenda.
Yes, thank you. Okay, at this time, is there any public comment?
In general, on anything?
This is the time for public comment, not on agenda items, if there's anything not on agenda items.
Yep, I have a public comment. I'm John Sellers.
Yep, and your
Most-
town?
Bristol, thank you. Most of you, I sent an email to about a couple weeks ago about the school buses, and not one of you's replied. I'm just kind of wondering why, not that I asked for a reply, but I was just kind of why that you didn't even respond to the email when a constituent, it says that, we got a problem that's being addressed, but no one even replies about it and says anything about it. Do you actually care about the school buses and the kids, or what's going on? That's my comment.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? So now, Jeff, any questions?
No, I was actually counting on seeing the tax cap numbers so that we could use those in determining if tonight's the night we've got to get this budget down to the tax cap level. You
Okay.
kind of know where we need to be before we start talking.
Okay, Christine?
I have more questions on the personnel side of things. In the back page, or in the way back where you talk about new or change of position request, I just want to clarify, reduce one elementary position at BHBS, but then 2 sentences down it says keep, there should be one open elementary position at BHBS that was not filled this year. Is that?
Correct, so we currently have one position in the budget that hasn't been filled. We're reducing another position. But we want to keep that one position open. So that was 2 first grade positions last year that we cut. We didn't fill one position, so we have that. And
So then reduce.
then we're reducing another one because we have currently 2 fifth grade positions and don't need 2 fifth grade positions next year. I believe it's 5th grade.
We want to leave a vacancy, but
Correct.
net reduce one position.
Another one. The Danbury Elementary School new position. This is for, what is the projection for next year?
That is based on next year, but also this year, just knowing that we had 21
What we just went
students.
through?
Yeah, we just have 21 additional students.
Do you think that position is?
And that's actually, the Danbury position is just moving a part-time position to full-time.
Is that the one you meant, or is it the additional paraprofessional that you meant?
There's a new, I think New Hampton has a new position. Oh, no, there is a new one, you're right. I think one was New Hampton, one was Danbury.
There was
A new position in Danbury as well. Yeah.
Teaching and.
No, it's a para position. It's a full-time para position and then moving a part-time para position to full-time. They're both para positions, they're not teaching positions.
Oh, okay. Okay. So do you think that the need for a teaching position you think is gonna come in as well?
I'm not sure, that's why we have that one position we've kept in the budget. We're actually filling it this year for the first grade position, but we're gonna keep that, I requested we keep that in the budget and not fill it, so that we, because again, one never knows where we might have it at, what we're gonna, I don't know what we're really gonna, we need to look at enrollment for kindergarten for Danbury, but it's making it a little tougher on combining grades, because we already combined 4 and 5, so we could combine 2 and 3. We have to look at where those numbers fall next year. Again, so one of those classes I think is at like 14 and one's at 9, so then you're at making another bigger class, so we have to look at that, but that's why I wanted to keep that one open position, continuing that in the budget, so we had some flexibility if we got, like we were able to do this year.
That's all I have for it.
Ben?
This is gonna seem really weird because it's just kind of in there, but there's, it's 10/22/13. It shows up as 118 in the description. It just was talking about the 100 series. Is that a new position or
Which section are you on?
Yeah.
Can you a little bit more?
their central services budget?
Part 3.
What page?
First page.
So,
Accountability?
is that the 10/22/13, 118 position?
Yep.
I believe that is, I'm thinking of the summer program, but there's nothing in that line before that, and it's a new line.
The summer program was in a separate place. I wrote it down,
I can find it exactly in a minute. I'm waiting for my computer to connect. It's been 10 minutes.
but, sorry Stacy, but I think the summer was a different, like you have
If
two
you go
different
to
function
that big
areas.
section, you can see it exactly.
Yeah, summer school's under a different thing, that it has its own place in your 3-ring budget.
Yeah, it's definitely a wage. I'm just trying to figure out which one it is. But if you'll notice, we moved a lot of things around.
See which one it is. Is that, professional development function. Almost.
Do you have another question while I was looking it up? Or we're waiting for the computer?
Yeah, it was just something that jumped out at me. I think I got probably procedural questions, comments that, you know, when I look through what's proposed, I guess I'm just curious how we're moving through this thing, because
Mike, it's 22/113, instructional staff training services.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
get into the database.
like specifically, there's a lot of capital items in here that I don't, maybe it's just looking at it from a different perspective when having done budgets within town before that, you know, to phrase it, I guess is the issue. You know, like, I guess the one that's just popping out on the slide presentation at me is the phone systems. And I procedurally don't know how that ends up in the general operating budget, only from the standpoint, I mean, is that similar money that was used in previous years. You know, so sometimes there's those capital expenses that you say, well, this is a technology upgrade, and we've generally spent $200,000 a year in technology upgrades. This just happens to be the project this year. Whereas this is a really large expense that is needed, don't get me wrong, but that I'm just kind of used to seeing not in the general operating budget and later in the warrant as a separate article. Because the issue that you know, and I have my beliefs on how the RSAs really read in relationship to the tax cap. And you could say, well, you want it in the warrant article because then you can spend that money and it doesn't really have anything to do with the tax cap. But at the same time, I'm going to disagree with that once again, but at the same time, when you spend $191,000 in the general operating budget on a one-time expense, it frees up that money to do a lot with in the next years that, you see what I'm saying?
Right, I totally understand where you're coming from. So I don't know how the district has historically done it, because obviously we're fairly new. But one of our goals, so there are capital items that need to get done. Now, I know in towns, a lot of times they do put them in as a separate warrant article. Although, for some things, I think that's great if you can live without it. At some point, we can't live without a phone system. So what happens when you put it in a warrant article and it fails, and our phone system dies? You can't, there's the notion of no means no. And when the taxpayers vote no down, you can't then purchase it. So that's the catch-22 sometimes for school, when you put things like that, when there are capital purchases that you need to do, like an oil tank or the middle school's new roof. So I think in the past, they have put capital expenses in the budget. I mean, just looking at it historically, and most of you have been here far longer than I have been, and Mike has been, and I think that's how it has been, as you put them in the budget.
It's definitely odd. Like, I'm not used to doing that. I usually have a 6 to 10 year capital improvement plan, which is funded out of capital reserves. You do it a little bit differently. You set up an expendable trust, and you'll notice this fiscal year, we're doing, it's just over $100,000 tank replacement. It's a requirement by the EPA for 2015. And what we did is you transferred $110,000 from the expendable trust into the general fund to cover that cost. Now, part of this, we could use that expendable trust if we look at it in terms of facilities. It's pretty vague as far as a facilities expendable trust. So we could elect to transfer in as revenue from the expendable trust to cover this project. So that's one way of looking at it, and that's how they've handled it here. I'm used to, this project would be fully defined, it's separate, and then it matches those and be considered a capital project, and it would probably be completely done within another fund.
And that's, I think, what the goal of the committee, the facilities committee, is to do, is to try to figure out what are those big projects, space them out, so that we don't have those upsets, so that one year we're not budgeting $100,000, and then the next year it's almost like, well, we can spend that money because it's in the budget, so that we can maintain a fairly steady pace of getting projects done that are on that bigger cycle. Unfortunately, I think what has happened is we've just hit kind of a wall on lots of things that haven't gotten done.
To answer your other question, I just remembered looking at the functions, professional development. In the teacher's bargaining agreement, there's $30,000 that gets paid out for special projects, but it's paid as wages. So that's why it's in that way. So it's actually $30,000 spread between the wage, FICA, and retirement. And then I think there's another $35,000 in the professional development, which is also a contractual item. So both of those are contractual.
So it had been somewhere else probably previously.
Yeah, it was.
As probably 30,000.
It was done actually in 1100, which is general ed, which is not how it really should be categorized, but that's a really good question. Because it had been done in 1100 320, and 1100 118, which is not, it's really is professional development for the staff. It's not involving students, so it shouldn't be an 1100 function.
I'm sure I'm gonna have more, I just kind of trying to get into this.
I'm in now too, so.
Setting, yes.
Okay, Vincent Paul?
The question on how many students we have now, what's the student count this month count?
It's in the front of your packet.
That was in the front of the packet.
Yeah, just don't remember.
I don't know if you want to set it right.
Was it 11,
From 10,
1158?
11:58. Yep.
1158 is the number. And do I have the proposed budget correct at 20,734,000? That sound right?
20,034,377.
734,377?
Yep.
Right. Thank you. One of the things that we've always done in the past is take the necessary time to go through the budget as thoroughly as we need to come up with the right number. And, last year, we came up with what was supposed to be a level-funded budget. It was called that. I didn't quite like the term, but be that as it may. I had told the superintendent I thought it was about $1 million too high. And we ended up giving $1.4 million, or having a surplus of $1.4 million from that budget. And that was when we had more than 1,158 students.
That's not the budget we worked on last year.
Excuse me, Michael, I have the
Sure.
floor.
Okay.
So this year, the proposed budget is far in excess, I think, of what we need. But I would also like to reinforce the fact that I think we hired the right superintendent because she's gone forward with getting personnel under control. She's dealt with some issues that have come up along the way that needed attention that we really weren't aware of. And I commendate her for those discoveries and, more importantly, the solutions. So I like to think we hired the right individual. And then she implemented a curriculum coordinator who's hopefully going to coordinate the solution to the curriculum problems that we've had. And then the school board at its September 22nd meeting voted to implement a K through 6 configuration 2 years hence, when we're likely to have far fewer students given the trends. I would like to go forward and suggest to this board, and at the appropriate time, Madam Chair, I'd like to turn this into a motion, perhaps not right now, but I'll defer to your direction on this. I'd like the superintendent to go back and come up with a plan to implement full-time kindergarten in all 4 of the elementary schools. And in addition to that, a single location, half-day kindergarten to accommodate the parents that don't want to take advantage of that. There's been tremendous research done on this, and I think there's absolutely no downside to it. If you combine adding full-time kindergarten to the other 2 things that we've done, which is to add a curriculum coordinator and hire the right superintendent to get the district under control, I think that this is going to go a long way toward improving student outcomes, which is really what we're here for. And so, whatever it costs to do that, I'd like the superintendent to come back with adding the $200,000 to $300,000 to the budget that'll be required for that, and bring it up over her proposed budget of $20,734,000 and change, so that we can use that as the number to start with, or continue with, I guess I could say, for whatever number of meetings are required for us to get it down to what we think is reasonable, including dealing with what may be an issue with the tax cap this year. The other thing I'd like to suggest is that We start with taking out of the budget the $16,000 expenditure to put in the overhead projector in the auditorium that I was disappointed we didn't just manually set up for. For whatever the shortcomings were of the prior administrations, we never had an issue with logistics on such matters. And when we had talked about talking to the public about closing the middle school and presenting data, I think it was inherent in that plan that we would need overhead projection for that meeting, and we didn't have it. And I don't like the idea of having to fill out a form for the purpose of having that facility at a meeting. I think it's like breathing. It's just something you have to do and prepare for. So I don't see us needing to spend $16,000 for the projection equipment to do that on a regular basis. So that's the first item I'd like to cut out. With that said, I did forward some information to the rest of the board regarding a study that was done in Bow on all-day kindergarten. I thought was very comprehensive and thorough. And I just see absolutely no downside to adding kindergarten full-time to our district at this point. It may even attract families to the district and prevent the number of students from dropping any further, increasing property values. So that's where I'm coming from on next year's budget.
Is that it?
Thank you.
Okay. I have a few clarifying questions. I have a comment on your kindergarten thing though. We have a full-time kindergarten teacher available and paid already for Bridgewater, Hebron, for New Hampton, and for Danbury. So really the only addition would be in Bristol. So I don't know that it would be a couple $100,000 to make that happen. But Stacy told us last time probably 1.5 teachers. So we'll talk about that some more because we.
So yeah, it would definitely be like 1.5 teachers, and then in this budget is reducing the New Hampton kindergarten teacher to half-time, so you'd have to put that back in. Probably furniture, transportation. I mean, there's lots of, we'd have to look at a lot of it, and I 100% support it. I just think when you, I think all-day kindergarten would be absolutely 100% fabulous. I just think when you see the tax cap and what we have to cut out, I've given you some suggestions. I think you're gonna really bare bones your budget again to do that. So I just think strategically you have to think about that.
Okay, I've got some questions, and some of them I'm gonna hold on because they may be answered when you do your presentation. My first question is, where is the increase to family and consumer science in here? Because under building budgets, I can't find.
It would be in the salary, the 1,100 line, it would just be built into that.
It doesn't have its own department, it's part of general ed.
Right, but when I went through and looked at things that increased, I couldn't find an instructional increase.
Well, there's more than one person under that account, right? So if you have some decreases in that account, you're not gonna see.
Okay.
It's upwards of, what, 50 teachers?
Right, so if you, as an example.
I just wanted to make sure it wasn't.
Yeah, as an example, if you look on the very first page, 1,100, 112, those are salary teachers, so it is in that line.
Okay.
You see that line went down by 90,000 because we also cut,
Yep.
I think 4 or 5 teachers, you know what I mean? So it went up and down depending on.
Yeah, okay. The second thing is under the special ed budget, salaries, education assistants. So it's page 1 of the special ed budget. And there's an increase there. It's 243, 253. Is part of that the second half of our adjustments? Yeah.
Yes.
And how much of that is adjustments only?
That's, hold on, I can tell you it's 118,000.
Okay. And so is the rest new staff?
So the rest would be the addition of the halftime Danbury to full-time, an additional Danbury, changes in staff, so anybody who like left and we hired, if they happen to be hired at a higher level, any changes in staffing would be in that line.
Okay. I also saw some increases in sub costs in a couple of places, and do you really anticipate that if the contract passes?
Yeah, well, so I will be upfront with you, so this year we are going through subs for a couple of reasons. One is to do the curriculum work that we need to get done at a fast pace, because we obviously haven't been addressing curriculum in a while.
Yeah.
So we're pulling teachers through a cycle of work, and so we're hiring subs to come in to cover those teachers, and we are probably using far more subs than we have in a while.
Okay. The next question is, and I'm gonna bounce a little bit just to stick with my notes. Under central services, on page 1, the very last item, replacement of computers, $225,418. And then up above, about a third of the way up, we have data communication, 70,000. So where is the 191,000 for the phone system? Is that one of those? I wasn't sure where to locate that phone system cost. I assumed it would be a central services budget item since it's all the buildings.
2225. Telephone.
We'll get you there.
It's in more than one location, because in there, there's the replacement of equipment, so there's the equipment spread out. And then there's cabling, so it's actually a project that would cover more than one object, so it's gonna be some 7, and I believe it's all in 2225.
And that is what the
I'm looking for it,
225,000 is. And then we have, this one's on, Mike, under 2225.738.0.0.00.
So, it's actually in a lot of places because of the way we have it. So, for example, replacement phones at just the middle school is $27,055, and you're gonna see that in 2225, which is the function code, the technology function code, and object code, which is the third element, 738.
Yeah.
So the 700s are all equipment-related accounts. So I've got phones at the middle school. I've got $15,438 for phones at BES, and this is just the hardware. The wiring for the phone system, for example, we price it out in every single building. It's pretty, we really went into it. It's under other professional services, so that'd be 2225,330. And for example,
Okay, so-
this is all in your very detailed summary. So if you were to go into the thick part of the budget and go into 2225, all the detail for this project spread out to those accounts. 2225,330 is the contracted services for the cabling. And 14,400 would be wiring for the phone project at the middle school.
Okay.
So it is broken out in many different places, but the consolidated project itself is, I believe, 191,000.
Yeah, that's what you said last time, and I couldn't find that dollar amount, so that's.
Yeah, you're not gonna see it in one neat spot.
Okay.
But
And then my other question is about summer school. And we've got two increases that go from 0 to something. So first salaries, education assistants, $21,590. Then other professional services, $20,058. This is on the first page of summer school. And so my question is, first, are they really new, or are these things that we are picking up as the grant is reduced?
They are, so if you look above, I think some of it is above. So if you see the 1220 account has 0, and then 1430, I think some of that is moving them, so the correct lines.
So summer school is not a function of special education,
Right.
which is what it was classified here. When we report to the state, these numbers really inflate what would be our special ed costs, right? Preschool, 1211 was under 1200 before as well, so you're gonna see some shortage there. But when we report on all the 1200s, preschool is a special ed program. So I would want to report it under all 1200s, but it's nice to separate it out so you actually know the cost of just preschool. So we do that. Normally, all the 1200s that we have in here would be 1210, and then preschool would be 1211. So there's a couple things we're trying to move in the right spot, understanding that probably in the past, people didn't really want to do that because it does create some confusion when you're looking across accounts.
Yeah.
You know, we're working on a project to redo the whole chart of accounts in which we would actually do some converting of old accounts to some of these new function codes where possible. You can find preschool, the summer school is definitely an area that's very different because that's leaving the 1200s and going to other programs, which is where it should be.
Okay.
But to answer your question, which original did, is this more funds from like Project Promise that we're now picking up? No, there is 0 more money budgeted in this budget other than like the changes. So we have been covering FICA and retirement other than the changes in those costs.
Okay.
Nothing else has been added for Project Promise. There's been no more increase in the budget.
Thanks. That's all the line for now. Sue?
Well, I think some of my questions were about things that had been moved to a different code. Because I would see a large increase, but maybe on the same page, I would
See the scissor
increase.
right?
So kind of,
So you see that a lot in like special ed, because it was like speech and hearing were in one section. We separated them out, speech and hearing, so that, well, one is it helps us track better, like how we're spending those dollars on speech or hearing.
PT and OT was a big
PT,
one to
yeah.
separate out. Yeah, because I would see the zeros where there had been a number, and then I would see.
Right below it, yeah.
where the numbers where there wasn't, where there had been zeros.
And in some of the consolidated reports, you'll notice that we kept it in, so for example, 2160 is now, it has 2162 and 2163. We can combine them all, so if I wanted to look and say, this hurts because now I can't see what you spent in prior years. So I can actually collapse that last digit and see all the 2160s, all the 2190s. And this follows the state uniform chart of accounts. So there really is a function. We didn't just make that up. There's a function for each one of these. It's kind of a simplified way of looking at it by just putting them all into one function. But this breaks it out very clearly, so you'll actually be able to see it and understand which. And for OT and PT, PT is mostly contracted, or is it the opposite? Yeah, PT is mostly contracted out, where OT is we have 2 quota positions. So you can see where we move that money and balance. What do we do with contracted services or versus hiring full-time or part-time help?
I did, let me see, on page, this is under part 1, page 3.
Part 1 on
Building. And then I just had a question about the game officials. This is 1420-930. And it looks like a high school 1.1. and that was cut, the 50,000 was cut, so is that?
No, and that's a great question too, because the 800, 900 object codes, 930 is considered a transfer account. And it's more than just game officials. So game officials are really a contracted service. So putting them in 930 is not what you want to do. So what I get is a purchase order for $8,000 transferring funds from the general fund to a student activity account for the payment of, and it actually is all sorts of different things. And it looks like just a transfer. That's not a good way of managing cash. Not only that, why would I be paying them out of a student activity fund? So there's a few things that we're trying on an accounting basis to shore up. So next year, we'll be paying, there will be an actual purchase order. So you can think, these are being taken care of, I think, in a Quicken account at each school. We never were 1099ing them. So you actually have to go in the system and go back through the records, add up each game official, add them into our accounting software, build them as a vendor, and then give them a manual 1099. That's not a good business practice.
So what happens right now, so you'll see most of those 930 accounts will have $0 in them, because basically, I think every school had some, and basically it was money that we would transfer into an account. They would just write checks off of that account with no accountability. So this is stopping that practice. So that money has just been transferred into,
It's either a 330 account, which would be under the athletics function code, 1420. So we're making a lot of those changes, so if I'm looking at the 930, at least that 930 account was in the correct function code. So now I'm just moving it out of a transfer, which would show up as other expenditures on a state report, to this is actually a contracted service.
so if you look up above 1420, 330 on the page above, you'll see an increase of 4150.
Right.
So we probably just reduced that line
So I
to
didn't
match.
And we did
what our
reduce that line, because
expenditures-
those weren't our real expenditures either.
I appreciate the detail that you've done here, and the fact that you're looking at actuals, not just amounts requested, but this is what we actually spent.
And we're trying to have more control. It's $50,000 of kind of transfer money into an account that somebody writes a check off of. Is not the best accounting
Right.
practices.
I just kind of highlighted things as I went through. Some things weren't.
They almost act as petty cash accounts for that function, which I would never want to have in anything like
It's a lot,
that. It's not,
It's not petty.
it's not, yeah, it's not petty, it's not a good business practice.
It's not like stamps or.
Assemblies, you may have noticed too, like, I think there was accounts for assemblies and enrichment and things like that, that were moved out of those 800 and 900 accounts
Yeah.
to the correct object that you'd want to report them. Those cover
Right,
things
it
like
seemed like there was-
graduation.
There's something like almost like a 99,000 or something. Is that? I've got to highlight it somewhere.
Oh, I just wondered if I could ask a question that is like maybe related. Under the New Hampton Community School, there had been a $900 cut under music department field trip. It's on page 29, under building. Is that the same thing? Has that been moved into an account, like out of the building?
Into actual field trips.
And into a field trip account? Yeah. somewhere.
Yes. And then your detail under 2725 transportation, 2 field trips, you're going to see under the 519 accounts, which was similar, actual increases. And we did include all the field trips in this budget and those are detailed in here.
Okay.
So if you look under those, you'll see in detail what field trips they actually plan.
Yeah, it was just so many transfers that I.
Yes, it's a lot.
So Ruby, if you look at that, so you see where the 27, 25, 519 music department trips, it's $900, but if you look above, right above it, we budgeted $9,000. we budgeted this year was 12,000, but historically it was only 7,000 and 6,700, so we budgeted 9,000, which should be, is still an increase and should be enough to
Yeah.
cover all of those
Okay.
things.
Okay, yeah, central services, page 2, was assemblies dash enrichment, and that is 2310,820. And there was a 99,888 figure, and I was just gonna ask you what was involved in that, what was included in that. 2310.
Oh, that was, I think, that assessment. It's once a year, I think we do that. Is that was specific to FY14?
It was only in FY14.
Oh.
And then it disappears.
Yes, okay, so,
Oh,
Do
yeah.
a district assessment or something?
And it's under board
Assemblies,
services, school board
enrichments.
members. Their function.
Yeah, I don't know what that was.
It's not the correct hourly code by the state. Did we, what page really?
I know there was something
Yeah.
that we had, assemblies on, people coming in. So that might have been it,
That
I'm
was,
sorry,
I
that's
think
not
that was
your-
unique. That was not in this year's budget.
Yeah.
What was that?
It's on
But it
page
was for
2
99,000.
of central services.
No, the number, I'm looking at detail.
I can go into that here.
2310-820.
Doesn't really impact it, it's not budgeted, but it is odd.
Yes.
And obviously there's something that
This is,
you did. Yeah, but it was from 14.
it's on board services.
Yeah, it's, return of 21st century community learning.
Oh, so it's
Center.
let's see.
That's 99,000.
That would have been like fun stuff.
Yeah, it is last year. It is in 20, so that was part
Oh,
of where we
yeah.
took the money.
I think it was your report.
Yeah.
I hate that 14, it doesn't, it's the year report.
So that's where we, or I should say,
Took the money,
our accountant
put the money,
took, yeah,
Okay.
I don't understand the answer.
that's the money we had to pay back
Project
for Project Promise.
that was part of the
Part
money
of
we
the
paid back to Project Promise.
Okay,
Yeah.
the title, of course,
Yeah,
doesn't indicate.
doesn't really
No.
fit.
Right. What did we do? Did we put on a really big
Yeah, I know, I
barbecue?
know.
It's a really good barbecue.
That's
It's like a wedding for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that would have been one-time events. So 800s are things like dues and fees, which is usually in a 810 account unless you did it 820. So 45,000 is to 2311, 810, and the rest was to 2310, 820. And of course, that has nothing to do with this year's budget, but the total amount was 144,976.
Sounds exactly right.
That's right from the PO.
And feel free to
No, I just didn't know if you were done.
just do this as I go along. Okay, let me see. Maybe this is just me, but on part 6, non-wage full budget details. Okay. Part 6, page 3. Started seeing in the notes reduce 200, and then it says, by moving to quarters, allied arts equipment usage is up because they see 8 groupings of students instead of the 6. So in a few places, it says, it's sort of justifying it because it's up, and yet it's reduced. And I couldn't make sense.
I can explain that, because I left the notes in from the principals. So when the principal got the budget from the classroom, the principal reduced it,
Yeah.
but it's still up. So the initial request was a little more than what the principal believed was necessary, and so they reduced the line and then left what you see there.
Okay.
So maybe previous history, they had spent $1,200 but budgeted $1,500, so the principal reduced it by 200.
Yeah.
But it was still up over last year's.
Okay. Oh, that makes sense.
I gotta ask. Okay, the justification is by moving to quarters, they've seen 8 groupings of students instead of 6. Isn't that like buying a pizza and the difference between cutting it in 8 slices and 6? They're seeing the same number of students in different groupings.
No, they're saying more students.
There's the same number of kids in them, but they're...
But they're doing more projects. So now, so before, and I will never get it right, depending on whether you take band or chorus. So like before, you might have taken family and consumer science only once in the 3 years. Now you have the opportunity with the block schedule to actually take it twice in the 3 years. So there is more opportunities to take more courses.
Okay.
Apparently that increases wear and tear. But you can see they did, this is one that jumps around a lot depending on the wear on the instruments. So you can see in FY13, they budget for almost the same amount, although last year they didn't spend nearly that much, or I should yeah.
Did you want to add anything, Amy? Since that's your building?
Nope.
That's correct, right?
Exactly what I was gonna say.
Yeah, okay. Because I saw you, you know, yeah, a lot of consumables there in those.
Yeah,
classes,
absolutely.
right.
And I happen to notice, same section, part 6, page 26, grade 6, replace geography texts from the 1980s.
About time we saw
I
that.
think so. There was supposed to be a cycle of replacement at one time where you did math books this year.
We're working on it.
And so something must have happened to that along the line. Nobody noticed it was missing. But I do know that they haven't had enough books, and when the kids can't take books home without asking, occasionally, it's just, they should be able to bring them home any night.
And we're moving to, if you want to talk about curriculum, we're moving to, it's not just textbook based either, so.
We're actually trying to get away
Yeah,
from textbooks.
textbooks in general because of current events and other things.
And I know because textbooks become outdated, especially geography and
Social studies.
social studies, my old maps are right. But, of course, if you're too dependent upon things like the internet and all, not everybody has it.
Or it doesn't work, has that.
Or it doesn't work.
They need to be able to reinforce what they hear in the classroom with a tool they can take home. I think it's, like I said, about time.
Same section, page 32, down at the bottom, it says tech note, not recommended by IT, alternative planned, new equipment from main office. I don't know what that means.
It's a printer.
It's a printer, so we're looking. Yeah, so one of the things we are looking at doing is we need to replace our copy machines at some point. So we're looking at cycling the copy machines to be our printers, which is how most districts have gone. As opposed to buying individual printers, you print on the copy machines, so.
And we're looking at also we're almost done with an RFP we're off cycle on all the copiers now. We own them outright, and we're in year 6 or 7, and they're malfunctioning a lot. So to replace those, and unfortunately, they were all bought at the exact same time. So you own them at the exact same time, they also die. So
Yeah.
in some of these cases, it's better to work with a lease agreement if you can manage it well with other services involved too, including the supplies to those. And we all, for example, the high school main copier is not connected to the internet. So I'm like, that's ridiculous. So why can't I scan it to an email address? And instead I'm getting these documents sent inter-office mail. So I was like, well, it had to have had a module for that. Well, to put that module in would cost a fortune on a device we already own. And then you have to buy the software, it's insane. So we have an RFP for an actual print management solution, not just a printer solution where we replace equipment. And we're looking at the way people work, the way students interact with teachers, and teachers interact with their classrooms. To say, in some areas, we might just need a multifunction machine, which also speaks to the network. And in doing this, we're doing an RFP for district-wide IDs. So if a teacher shoots a print job off, they can pick it up at any one of these printers. And instead of having to type in a code, it's not monitoring like who's using so many copies. It's they can hit that job and delete jobs right from the machine. So we have a really good plan right now for that, and we're looking to do that within our budgetary constraints, and we hope to do something like that this year.
And so probably looking at leases more than purchases? I know we did.
Yeah. Because
For those
it's
kinds of things,
Yeah.
you
it's a
know,
major capital purchase, and it really hurts your budget. It's like the phone system. So if we can keep it on a constant cycle of improvement, you don't get into these everything's breaking all at once
Yeah.
situations.
and we're, you know, I know Bristol Elementary School, the guy is there at least once a week fixing it, it's just constantly breaking down. Because again, they're all the same age.
So these copiers, though, would be sufficient for use for printers?
Yeah, so some of the items being requested are really reactionary to the fact where all these things are breaking down and they're not in the right spot and they don't have internet connections and so on. So what you're seeing there is really a recommendation, like we prefer that we don't buy that. If we can get this print solution in this year, it would be completely unnecessary. So if it does stay in the budget, something that we'd internally cut next year regardless.
So is that what's on page 4 of that section? The equipment rental?
Yeah, so those equipment rentals was in the budget this year, and we're leaving it in the budget because we're going to use that probably towards leasing. But I can't say we're using it towards leasing because we don't have that done yet. It's going to be an RFP, and it's going to probably be a financial arrangement that also would be inclusive of supply accounts because I can't pay for it all with that rental cost. So when you look at it, it's working with a vendor to also, what's one of the most expensive pieces of a printer? So often in a year, is the toner. So it's a way of utilizing what we pay for toner now and go with single service item where we'd actually save money on supplies. So between supplies and the rental, we want to make it cost neutral to the budget. So if we can get that solution implemented this year, we're confident that would be cost neutral in next year's budget, given what's being currently budgeted for. And then we're also protected if we can't do it within the constraints of this budget year, then we're still budgeting for our toner and whatnot, the way we would normally do that.
Public Service announced a 12% rate increase. They got approval for. I know we have a special rate from another vendor, but I see here you estimate a 7.13%. Is that going to be enough?
I think so. One of the things, so right now I'm going off contract and going back to the provider from the rates, and then I'm looking to contract at some time after the elections. I'm hoping to see, electric's not following the same path as oil, which we got a great rate. We were below